Hi, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the StackGen State of Reliability 2026 report. This is a deep dive into what over 100,000 incidents are telling us about how services are failing in the age of AI. My name's John Jamie. I'm the VP Marketing at StackGen, and I'm going to be joined by Aakash, who our lead SRE here at StackGen. And we're very excited to be taking you into today's report. Hi, Aakash. Welcome.
Hello, John. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, Akash. It'd be great if we just perhaps give the audience just a little bit of background about ourselves as we get started here. I'll start. I've worked in cloud infrastructure for probably over 5 years now, multiple companies, and have been working together with some of our team at StackGen on putting together this data over the last few months, building a strong view of what complex status pages are telling us. And so I'm today going to take a role of sharing with the audience the data and what some of the findings are. And I'm going to be joined with Aakash for his expert opinions as an SRE. So Aakash, do you want to just mention a little bit about yourself and what you're going to be focusing on in today's session?
Yeah, sure. So, hello everyone. This is Aakash. I have over 9 years of experience in the space of SRE, and I have worked with multiple companies over the past. I have seen the bigger ones. I have seen startups and how they work with SRE. Right now in StackGen, I'm also the lead SRE here. And yeah, very excited to talk about this report in today's webinar. Thank you.
All right, excellent, great. So let's go and take a look at the agenda in terms of some of the areas that we've got coming up today. So we're going to dig into what we see as some of the factors driving the landscape today and some of the gaps that we saw around the research that had gone on in the space about reliability. We'll get into some of the headline findings from our research. We'll be giving you a few of the highlights today. We'll also be sharing at the end of the report a link to get both the summary web version and also the full report where you can dive in further and get more from this very rich data set. We'll also share with you some of the takeaways that we saw from looking at this research. And then finally, we'll close a bit of discussion on where we see the role of AI in SRE today from the perspective not only of how AI is impacting incidents, but also how AI can support SREs in their role as well as a tool. So that's the high-level agenda. So let's get into first the data and why we developed this. I'll mention a little bit about what we built here, and maybe Akash, you can give your perspective in terms of what's different from your perspective in terms of what's out there before. So we basically gathered data from company status pages, and many companies, especially in the dev tool space in particular, have very solid data or very solid status pages. We end up covering about 390 companies across 14 different sectors, and we'll be showing you some of those sectors later on. We also, on the sector basis, is actually some for folks who are in these particular industries. Please keep an eye out if we mention your industry. We do have some extra depth around the reporting that we could share with you for your specific sector. And we look back over multiple years. So we tried to focus most on the last few years so that we could get a sense of what's happening year to year. And then we tried to go back as further as we could. So that's in terms of how we gathered the information here and where we focused. Maybe Akash, I'd love to get your thoughts on what's different here from perhaps other types of data that SREs have access to today.
Yeah, basically, this is a very large data set that we have, and all these incidents that we are seeing are coming from publicly available reports that you can see on the status pages. So it's not a confined survey that has happened with few companies. So this is a much wider data set that we are talking about, and there are no assumptions here. We're just looking at whatever we are able to see online, whatever data is able to see online. So this is like a high level view of the map. We are not trying to navigate the map. We're just trying to look at what do we see in the whole landscape in terms of incidents across the industry. So yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, and I think as we get into it, we'd also say that, we sort of welcome people's thoughts around where we should go further with additional research in terms of looking into what's causing certain types of incidents, what are the best solutions in some of these areas as well. That could add to this picture that we get from the status pages. Yeah, right. Yeah, so let's go into the next page and start to get into a few of the findings. So one of the findings that came out, which we're showing at the top here, is that there was our MTTR calculation, by the way, we're using when we say MTTR, we're measuring that in terms of the start time and the end time of an incident that's disclosed on the status page. We're using when we say MTTR, that's what we're referencing. What we did see here is that the MTTR across companies, it varies. In the AI sector was tended to be the fastest with about an hour MTTR. The applications companies, so like a Salesforce.com, for example, would be an application company, about 2 hours. And then infrastructure companies like a Cloudflare, for example, tended to be much higher at around 3 to 4 hours. And we'll get more into that as we go into the next few slides. We also, secondly, noticed that quite a few of the incidents were dependencies on third parties. For example, if your cloud provider was to go down, that would be an example of a third-party dependency. But others it might be your email provider, it might be your CDN provider, or it might be someone who provides security and so on. This was fairly common in the data set. So over nearly a quarter of incidents here had some tie to a third party. And these took longer to resolve than other failures. And then third, I think, was the growth in AI incidents. We looked at it a few different ways, and we noticed perhaps as folks might expect, that the share of incidents coming here from AI that are AI related, either it's the companies themselves or the cause of the underlying cause of the instance race AI has grown rapidly over time, with growing to around about 10% incidents now come from an AI company in terms of the set of incidents in our data set. Aakash, that's kind of a few of the top level findings. I know we'll dig into some of these as we further go, but what are your thoughts at a top level?
Yeah, at a top level, the AI related incidents was something that I was expecting to grow, but that growth is going to be very recent because not all AI code is in production. Companies are adopting AI for sure, but it has only been in the recent days that you'll see that actually production grade services are being contributed by AI. So that number is growing, but I'm pretty sure that number is going to keep growing. And also, when you talk about AI related incidents, right, it's very difficult to bucket them into AI related. So how do you define it? Because if your code is written by AI, but it is also the developers also contribute to the same code. So if some part of your code is written by AI and then it goes into production and causes issue, do we have the means to figure out, oh, this particular incident was caused by the particular, let's say, a functionality which broke, which was by AI? I don't think we have that sort of information or data available yet, but it will be good to see how companies are going to classify their incidents going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Aakash. In some ways, it's not just perhaps your AI model provider going down or your AI agent acting up in some way, but because AI is being used to generate almost all the code or all the code in some cases, its impact is very, very widespread. Yeah. So let's get into it and let's see what some of the patterns are over time here. So we just mentioned in introduction there before, we grouped companies into 3 broad sectors, with the AI model providers having the fastest MTTR, then the kind of companies with the application tier, and then infrastructure related companies having the highest number here. The other comment that we noticed on this slide is that outside of the AI sector, the MTTR is not really coming down over time. We were expecting that perhaps with using kind of AI for SRE purposes, that we would see kind of reductions here, but it seems kind of flat at the stage still. Aakash, what are your thoughts here? What was your expectation, and why do you think we see what we see here?
Yeah, I think we still need a few more years to start seeing the effects of AI in bringing down the MTTR. And so if you see in the past years, mostly where the AI was adopted in these industries were during the development of the product or software or the service that you're talking about. But recently we have started seeing emergence of a lot of AI in SRE space or DevOps space as well. Many of the observability tools also provide AI solutions now. So hopefully with more adoption of AI in the SRE space, I'm hoping we see the number go down in the coming years. And I think that's the reason why we don't see a major drop down in infra tier or the application tier. As for the AI model providers, if you see their MTTR is very low, I think that comes down to the AI companies are investing heavily into making sure into their SRE in specifically if you talk about it, because their KPI is their API, right? If for any new technology to be adopted widely, it has to work, right? So if you want to onboard, so the main aim for these AI companies to get as many users as possible, and how it's going to go is once the user gets hooked onto, let's say, one of the platforms, let's say OpenAI or Anthropic, that the user is going to keep coming back to it. And if the user has a bad experience, let's say it constantly goes down, that the user might switch. So for gathering of hooking on as many users as possible, these guys are trying to make sure that their services are up and running. And also this is more confined. If you see, the infra tier has the largest MTTR. That's the reason, because of a large number of services contributing for their uptime. Look at AWS, for example, right? What do you call downtime in AWS? Because there are thousands of services. So if anything goes down, it's still a problem. But for companies specifically for whom the KPI is who are just providing API endpoints as their KPI, it is still easier for them to maintain a shorter MTTR, because the the points of failure are less compared to industries like infra providers.
Yeah.
So that might be the reason, but they are heavily investing in their reliability. So that's the reason why we are seeing a lower MTTR over there. And maybe they have access to, maybe they adopted AI SRE or AI in other factors of the whole deployment pipeline, the delivery pipeline, much earlier than the rest of the industry, because of they had access to the models much more earlier, right? Even better models, maybe they tweaked it better. So that might be the reason. Although just want to call out specifically in the report, we are just looking at what the data is showing us, not necessary that we have the exact answer on why this particular behavior is seen over here. But yeah, looking forward to see how this number reflects going forward for the AI model providers as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah. All right, let's try to peel the onion a little more on the same view. And so what we then did, if we then double click into those different three sectors, if you look on the left here, the AI tier, the app tier, the infra tier. So we actually, these are some of the individual industries that make up those broader groupings. And you can see, for example, the infrastructure, we have the cloud providers, for example, AWS, but we also include fintech, payments, security, communications, data platforms, and you can then see in the other groupings that they tend to stick together somewhat in terms of the infra companies having the longest MTTR. And so it seems this sort of characteristics, I think, as Aakash mentioned, have to go with these industries in terms of points of failure, and I think also the cost of things going wrong can be very high. Perhaps these helps explain why the MTTR is longer there. Perhaps it's regulatory reasons, regulatory factors perhaps to be addressed as well, things like fintech and payments before you take your service back live again, perhaps after an incident. So these are some of the possible factors causing the higher MTTR here. And then on the right here, we also showed what was the stability in terms of the relative MTTR for a subset of these sectors over time. And so surprising was a surprise that they're relatively stable over time in terms of if a sector is at a certain rank, it tended to stay that way over multiple years. Aakash, this was kind of a interesting finding, I think, here. What are your thoughts on this? I know you gave us a high level in the last view, but what additional do you think comes out when we look down at these individual sectors?
Yeah. So over here, as you can see, right, the MTTR relatively still remain flat for all the industries. And if you see, if you look at it, I would say last 1.5 year is where the adoption sort of boomed. When models, if you see, like introduction of capabilities like reasoning, MCP integrations, that's when the adoption in the tech industry actually went up. Before that, if you see, mostly the AI models that were available were just chat based interfaces, where maybe you have a customer support chatbot in your application who can get you responses, but the agentic capabilities of AI which emerged recently. And when you say old in terms of AI age, it's 6 months. So when you say in older days, it's 6 months. Within 6 months, everything completely changes. So the adoption has recently, I can say the adoption is going on, is increasing over years. And maybe down the line, we'll start seeing some changes in these MTTRs. But you can see, right, for example, infra tier, as you talked about it, the cost of failure is much more higher. How these companies, how much adoption of agentic AI or AI in general in these companies is currently happening is something that is yet not known to us. So the infra tier, even with AI coming in, I think the infra tier companies are still going to have the longest MTTR going forward as well. It might help in the app tier, but the infra tier for sure.
Yep, got it, got it. And just for the folks who are here today, as I mentioned at the start, we actually have company level breakdowns within these sectors. And so if folks would like to get their specific data and how they sit on MTR versus their other companies sector, please just put a note in the comments if you'd like us to share that with you, or reach out to Aakash or myself individually. We'll go and look up your company and see if it's in the data set, and we're happy to share with you the findings in terms of at a company level within your sector as well. We didn't want to call out the folks who apparently seem to have the highest MTTR in the sector. And you do also on that front want to acknowledge that companies do report MTTR or do report their incidents in different ways in terms of how quickly they might notify customers or not. So we do want to just acknowledge that. Yeah. So in the interest of then further peeling the onion, so I think if you can see, folks see here, we drill down the sector and we can go down to company. The other area that we then wanted to look at was what's behind these, what's the cause of these incidents, or what's the failure mode. And so we had a very diverse data set here. And so what we ended up developing for the report, and again, we're happy to share with folks who are interested, this taxonomy of failure modes. And also there's some related taxonomies also around not only failure modes, but root causes, and then also the types of remediations being applied. So we developed this way to categorize all the incidents that we could in the data set. Not every company discloses the full details on their status page. The reporting varies, but where we could, we tried to classify the incidents along this particular scheme. And so we broke down the failure modes into 8 families. And then within each of those, there was a set of failure modes. So for example, the very first one here, FMO1, third-party dependency. So this would be, my cloud provider has gone down on a critical service, for example. Another example would be on family 4 here, resource exhaustion. Okay, I'm running out of CPU or memory, for example. But this is the way that we ended up deciding to try to tackle it in order to classify the different failures. Aakash, what's your thoughts here? How do people typically approach this at a company level in terms of trying to have common ways of talking about failure modes?
Yeah. First of all, we have used these taxonomies to classify the incidents, and I would highly encourage the SREs or leads in their own organizations to also apply these to the past incidents that they have seen and try to bucket them into their incidents into these taxonomies so that they can understand, they can get a clearer picture of what exactly is the type of incident which requires their utmost attention, right? And if you see propagation failures at the first family, the third party dependencies usually comes the first. As John has already mentioned, it's almost a quarter of your problems, quarter of incidents that have happened. But third party dependencies can be anything, right? It's not just the entire cloud provider going down, but it can be a bug in your in any dependencies that you install in your code. It can be a small service, third party service that you're relying on, that can also go down. That can also result in your application not behaving the way you want. So, and I would like to talk about the family 2 here, which is tail and outlier failures. Maybe in your observability, there was a spike in terms of errors, but it got flattened out in your P50s, right? So you look at your observability dashboard and hey, everything is green, but then why did the outage happen for, let's say, XYZ amount of time suddenly? So we surely need to have better visibility on our services. And I would like to really point out a thing that we write Grafana dashboard queries where we create dashboards every now and then. And the pain of writing GraphQL queries every single time if you want to get a new data. Many times what happens is, hey, let me just write a query for now. I'll save the dashboard for later. Those sort of things used to happen. But now, since most of the observability tools, tools like Observe Now or Grafana, all of them have AI capabilities and they can create dashboards for you. So please use that. Have more context aware dashboards so that you don't miss out on these incidents. But yeah, then we have the change induced failures. I'm hoping to see these numbers go up, John, actually, because the pace at which the development is happening right now is growing exponentially. The new features get built in. Earlier it was sprint was in agile framework, sprint used to be like 1 week or 2 weeks for organizations, and maybe one or two features might get shipped, smaller features. But now it's like every single developer can solely contribute to an entire feature and get it shipped much faster, right? So that time has gone down. So change induced failures, I'm hoping to see them go up. For capacity and resource failures, if you are seeing issues there, what I would suggest is have better resource planning in place. You need to really start monitoring all the infrastructure that you have. It's not something, usually the way to tackle this is over provision, and then you try to tweak it till it works for you, rather than going the approach that, hey, let me start small and then scale up. That is much more, what I would say, that is difficult than doing the scale down. Okay, apart from that, yeah, these are the families. I just wanted to just, I don't want to go through each and every family and each and every type of incident, but for sure every company should do this exercise and classify. And you can find the full list of taxonomies that and the families, incident families, that we have created in the report, John, which the folks will be able to get from this webinar as well, the detailed taxonomy. Am I right?
Yeah, and we've also started to publish some blogs about some of the modes as well. So yeah, and we'll be expect to be sharing more too over time.
Agree.
Great. So let's now take a look at the next slide. And this is a summarized version of how we applied the taxonomies around failure modes, root causes, and remediation to the incident set that we're able to classify, which is about 34,000 out of the total here. And how to read this chart. Basically, each column is a 100% bar of the incidents. And so the height of each of the sections within each bar is like how many incidents there are of that type. And so on the left, when we start with the failing modes, we've got third-party dependency, deploy and config issues, data-related, resource exhaustion, the kind of the top four patterns there. And then you can see through the connecting lines to the next section, what were the root causes typically that kind of went with that. And then on the right, what was the most common remediation that was applied to address those incidents. And so the four basic patterns that sort of came out here was third-party dependency, causes a third-party vendor, and most common factor was to wait for a fix. Second was deploy something. There's some sort of error in the code of a configuration, and so typically a rollback, restart, or fixing a bug was done there. Data-related items, often due to something about the data pipeline, for example, things getting stuck in the pipeline, and a mixture of diversity of types of solutions there, whether it's rolling back or restoring the data set in some way. And then resource exhaustion due to capacity or not scaling up, and either adding capacity or shedding load was the most common pattern there. So that's what we came back with in terms of findings, Aakash. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this pretty much talks about, is the same point that we talked about in the previous slide, but this just the remediation, that these are the common remediations that we usually take, right, in order to tackle the failure modes that we're talking about. But finding the root cause is really important. I would say when you're trying to do this exercise for your own organization, don't just say that, hey, my failure mode belongs to this category, so let me just directly do this remediation. I would say do a proper postmortem on your root cause, because yeah, the failure mode that you see at the surface might be deceiving, and the actual fix that, or the remediation that is needed, might be something else. Be very careful when you're trying to classify your incidents. That is one suggestion for sure. And yeah, that's what I don't have much to say on this slide. It's self-explanatory. It doesn't need any specific SRE inputs. This is something I would say every SRE who has joined this call pretty much knows and has done the restart of their microservices a bunch of times even today. So yeah.
Yep. So I think probably the one of the points for the future interest here would be to see what's the change in the mix and failure modes. I think, like you mentioned, is the deployment config related? Is this going to grow as we see more velocity? And so perhaps more focus on having strong practices around the rollback, restart, automations, and so on might be the kinds of things that could be potential investments in that area. Great. All right, let's double click into a couple of causes. Look at the third party dependencies, as we mentioned earlier, quite frequent, quite common as a cause of incidents in the database. Some spikiness in 2025 we found due to some major outages from at the cloud, CDN, security layers, including a couple of the major cloud outages and also CrowdStrike as well, affecting 2025. Kash, in terms of the implications for SREs, we put some comments here. What are your thoughts here around and for what SRE, how SRE teams should be tackling this kind of third party patterns? It looks like it's a failure mode that's here to stay.
Yeah. It's very important that you have observability on not just your own services or your own, what do you call it, own infrastructure, but also on all the third party dependencies that you have, right? So it can be their status pages. So have them integrated in your own observability dashboards as well. And I think Sachin also talked about this in the AISRE next event that we had in Bangalore, where they had all these dashboards ready with them and they all were green. It was a major airline company which had an outage, and all the dashboards over there were green, and they had no clue why a particular outage had happened. So even for that outage to surface, after the client actually reported that something has gone wrong, which is something that you obviously don't want to happen. If your client shouldn't be the first person to tell you that something is not working, it should be you who should be identifying it much earlier. And that's where they missed one of the vendors who were providing the fiber cables for the connection had went down, and they had no visibility on these vendors. So what I would say is try to have more visibility on the statuses of your third party dependencies in your own dashboard as well. Don't it should not be a reactive measure that you take, that hey, my dashboards are looking green but still something is not working, so let me go and look at the status pages or the uptime of the third party dependency that I'm using. Have them ready with you from the very beginning, right? Have these dashboards ready with you so that you are notified. That should also be taken as that should also have alerts that hey, let's say GitHub has reported an issue with, let's say, your pull requests or your GitHub action pipelines, right? Things like that, which might go and break your own delivery of your services, right? So have alerts over there as well, so that it doesn't happen that you see everything is green but in the real world something has actually gone down. So that is very crucial, John, at- in order to tackle the third party failures.
Yep, got it. Yeah, and the other question I wanted to ask you, Kash, was around the level of effort you should put into kind of dual sourcing potentially on vendors. I'll give an example of I was at SRECon early this year, and the MLB baseball league talked about how they are basically providing a lot of redundancy. For example, when they're filming like live matches at live games at stadiums, and they will have different network paths in case it's like a failure in a switch, for example. So it's very high stakes to have an outage or to lose the connection. So they feel like it's worthwhile to have these kind of redundancies. What's your advice? Obviously, it can be very costly the more you try to set up the ability to go across multiple clouds, for example. It can just not be worthwhile. How would you think about it in the context of it as an SRE?
Yeah. So see, at the end of the day, it's all about balance that you want to maintain, right? It's like saying that, should I use microservices for my portfolio website? No. Obviously, no, you don't want to do that. Same goes for this as well. It completely depends upon what sort of budget your company is willing to allocate in order to monitor the third party services. Do you have enough bandwidth to do, and how bigger of an impact do you see happening due to third party failures in your day to day operations, right? If it is a frequent occurring issue that you're seeing, maybe then look for have observability there. That's the cheaper option, and B is to look for alternatives, right? So if can I have an alternative ready with me if something goes down here? Can I do something? Can I use something else? So I'll give a very specific example here. So just like GitHub provides managed runners for running your pipelines, there are other providers like Blacksmith who also provide you runners, right? So if, let's say, for any given reason the GitHub action runner is not working, go with Blacksmith, or the other way around. Maybe Blacksmith provides you runners at a cheaper rate, right? So affordable rates as compared to. So maybe you're using Blacksmith, but Blacksmith will have more outages It's a relatively newer company, not as well established as GitHub, backed by Microsoft. So
Yep.
then you can fall back to
Yep.
Microsoft and GitHub, right? If you are facing issues with Blacksmith. So this is one such example. But yeah, then you can look for fallbacks. But it's all about balance, right?
Yep.
It should not happen that your observability stack is more complex than your actual application.
Yep.
That should surely be avoided.
Yep.
Know what you really want. Invest in where you're seeing the actual problem. We talked about taxonomies earlier. Don't just go on tackling every single one of them. You have to pick one at a time and try to tackle it and see if you see success. Because if you do it in iteration, that's where you'll be able to apply the learnings that you did in the first iterations to the next ones once you solve those incidents, right? You will surely have learnings. So it's not a one shot thing that can be implemented to solve this. It's more of a process that we need to follow. Yep.
Yep. Got it. All right. Yeah. So that's a treatment of kind of third parties there. Let's move forward and start to look at some of the AI factors here, as I know quite a lot of folks have expressed interest in this area. And just as we do, I do notice some questions coming in. Thank you everybody for crossing those. We'll get through some more of the content here, and then let's take a set of questions after we get through the main material here. Yeah, so Aakash, AI incidents are up. Perhaps no surprise. Some of the statistics here around the growth. There's multiple factors I'd say driving this. One is just AI. AI is there are more AI companies now. They're now a larger portion of the data set. AI is being used more now in services as well. And three categories of kind of AI-related incidents that we thought we should highlight here. One is category one, upstream, your AI provider goes down. So, for example, OpenAI or Claude goes down, you can't access the API. Second is, and that's fairly clear maybe when that happens. Category two is your AI service continues to work, but it's no longer working like it's meant to, and it's not providing the correct outputs. Can be a tricky one, I think. And then third category is an emerging one in particular, which is as people are now giving more AI more autonomy, the risk that the agents don't do what you want and can cause some production issues. What do you think, Aakash? What's your feedback here on the impact of AI in terms of the impact on SREs?
Yeah. So this is pretty interesting, right? The three categories that we're talking about here. So AI is a upstream service that's pretty self-explanatory, and I would say it's if you are relying heavily on a model from a specific provider, then that situation can get tricky going forward once you scale. I would say have failovers, have multiple options. So you should not be hard locked onto a specific model provider. So I would say build your applications when you're integrating it with AI. These models should be swappable. I know it's difficult. It's easier to say because these models behave a little bit differently. For example, once you try to move from, let's say, OpenAI to Google Gemini, you might see a completely different outputs, right? Make sure your application is resistant to that in order to solve the first one. It's a difficult one. It's easier to say, but a difficult one. AI model quality degradation. Again, this is not proven, but there are some independent studies that exist over the web, which talks about as and when new models are released, the older models quality have degraded. I don't know if that is 100% true or not, but basically the parameters in the backend for these models are transparent to us. We are not sure if these parameters ever change. All we see is a number for the model that we are using, right? 4.05, 4.6. But what parameters can be tweaked in the back, we are not sure. So that one can be very tricky to solve. The third one, autonomous AI agent causing damages. This completely depends upon the harness that you build around it. Okay, so you can't just let it do whatever it wants. You have to be very specific on the type of actions you want the AI agent to perform. How much autonomy do you want to give it, and what sort of safety nets are in place, right? If let's say something goes wrong, maybe it's a human in the loop situation where some final review is done, or certain RBAC permissions, certain RBAC rules applied on these AI agents so that they don't perform any destructive actions and things like that. That is something that for sure we can implement. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep.
Yep, a lot going on here for SREs to handle. So I think it's not necessarily just more incidents, but different types of incidents with more complexity. Yeah. All right, great. Let's go through a couple other insights here. One, we've started to expand our coverage here on how many agent-caused incidents there are. So we've been looking. We started with the status pages. We've also started looking now at the issues that are being flagged to model providers from the end users as well. And we're seeing basically quarter on quarter the rate of growth is quite significant here. For time reasons, we won't go into any of the examples on the right here, but we'll be publishing more on our blog about some of these incidents and what we see as some of the underlying causes. Just briefly, a risk factor one we see is, do you have the right approvals in the for the agents being taken on actions? The kind of agent governance, I think, becoming a key aspect of ensuring reliability, I would say, in this, as agents take more role in applications. Okay, let's move on from this one. So up till now, we've covered a little bit about what types of incidents we're seeing, what are the patterns by industry, by type. Here we wanted to a little bit take the different view and see what are SRE teams, what explains the MTTR for a given company. And what we kind of noticed here was that these industry factors, while as you've seen earlier, they are significant, that there's actually a lot more variability over and above which company you are, which industry you're in, and which failure modes you're dealing with. There's still a lot of variation, and so we'd say at least 3x more impact from these incident-specific factors than these broader structural drivers. Aakash, I'd love to get your quick thoughts on what could be going on here and why there's so much variation.
Yeah, this is very interesting, right? So we till now, if you look at the reports at a high level, you might think it's all about the classification of organizations. So if it's infra tier, the MTTR is always going to be high, but it's not the case. And that's something that we see in the data. It largely depends upon your company. So in the same tier, in the application or infra, in the same sort of family of your organization, you can have a very different MTTR. It varies from company to company and how mature their response to an incident is. I've worked in the service industry as well, and I've worked with multiple clients, and they were in the same industry, and their way of tackling incidents would be completely different, right? Whether your first responses are from a third-party vendor or are they in-house, how good is your on-call assignments, how good are your run books, right? Whenever an incident happens, all these things also matter when you're trying to tackle incidents that happen in production. So don't take it directly that I'm in the infra tier, so it's okay for me to have like 3R MTTR window. Your company and your own practices that you implement in your own organization will have much more impact on your MTTR as compared to what sector you are actually in, and that can be seen in the data. John, yeah.
Yep, got it. Yeah, so let's move forward. One of the other findings that came from the report, we tried to assign companies into segments, or we call archetypes here, based on what was some of the types of failures differentially that were much higher than the average in the data set. We came back with these 6 groupings, and our suggested implication for the audience is to take a look at your own failure mode mix and see which of these groups you might see, if one of these groups fairly well describes your particular patterns, and these can have different explanations for where to focus going forward. Let's go on to the next slide now and talk about some of the takeaways for the audience. Aakash, would you like to just take us quickly through these kind of 5 takeaways here for the audience?
Yeah. I think this the first one we already talked about. Have visibility on your incidents, right? Start classifying them. You saw the archetypes, you saw the taxonomies. Classify them so you know what mix of incidents you have. AI incidents are a new failure class for sure. And now that we are seeing it, especially with the emergence of agentic AI, because now it is able to perform actions. Then the third one is response maturity matters 3 times more than the industry. That was a slide that we talked about. How your company, the practices that you follow in your own organizations is going to be of utmost importance as compared to the industry that you are in. Third party dependency may still be one of your top risks, and it's not a direct, there is no direct solution for it. But yes, if you apply observability over there and you try to have failover options, then maybe you'll be able to tackle it. But third party is always going to stay. I don't think so this is ever going to go away. No company can just be like self-contained completely and build everything in-house, right? And know your archetypes and the ones that were mentioned in the previous slide, and then you can decide where you want to invest. So do these activities first, figure out which are your most like the highest pain points that you have, and then start investing into trying to solve them. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, great. Thanks, Akash. Yep. And then we had a couple other for folks who do have a key third-party dependency. We have on the next page, we have some suggestions. We'll share with the audience as a follow-up these lists here. We won't go through all of them just for time reasons, but here are some specific tactics that are available. And if we go to the next slide, and then we're going to have one more, and then we'll go to the questions. I think we mentioned at the start of the session that we would come back to this question of, is AI going to help address what we do see as this risk of growing incidents and more challenging new types of incidents, that these could cause a crunch factor on SRE capacity and workload. What are your, and Akash, I think you've mentioned some of the drivers of that, more POCs, more activity going on. In terms of, Akash, in terms of where AI may be able to play, what are your thoughts on what's working now and where is the sport from AI likely to head over time?
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly the gap is there, right? The developers are shipping code much more faster. POCs, the timeline for POCs has also shrunk over the past few months or years. At this point, I don't even know the time frame to select. But yeah, and you have more services to observe. The sort of adoption that we are seeing in the development phase, I think that sort of adoption also needs to happen in the SRE space. If you see this, the SRE team strength has relatively remained flat, even though the pace at which the development is happening has gone up. So now the SRE team is thinly spread than ever before, right? We have to provision infrastructure for POCs. We have to again monitor those services. Maybe there's a demo going on that we have to make sure that the MVPs or the POCs go smooth in the demos, things like that. It basically eats up into the time that you have. You'll have, even though you can build all the dashboards that you want, but then if you have 200 dashboards to look at, how are you going to keep monitoring them? So it's really important that we use AI in this space and build more contextual dashboards, which will be able to give you contextual insights on what is exactly going wrong, trying to figure out what's the blast radius if a particular alert happens, what all services might be affected by it. So for sure, adoption of AI in SRE space is needed, but we should also be aware of the fact that the thing that we saw in the developer space, that for when AI emerged, agentic AI, and it started contributing to the coding practices, companies suddenly thought that, hey, I can work with less developers and ship more code. And then it was a bad time for developers. But then later on, it all came back, and then developers came back. They understood that, hey, I still need more developers, even though, because you'll find new things to do.
Yep.
Even if the basic tasks are taken care by AI. Same is going to happen with AI. I just hope that thing doesn't happen with AI SRE, and industry has already learned from what happened with developers. Even though I'm a lead SRE, it's not like StackGen only has one SRE guy and bunch of AI agents who are doing my work. We still have a team. Even being an AI company and having AI products on our own, we have actually scaled up our SRE team as we scale with more clients. So yeah, that is something that I hope happens in the SRE space.
Yep. Yeah, good. All right, let's go and if we can move to the next slide, just the final slide here, and we'll cover some questions here in the last few minutes. And yeah, also we do want, for folks who want to get the report, just look at the web version of the full report. There's kind of a link here. You can do that, and let's take some questions. And we got a QR code there as well for folks who want to just use the phone to access it as well. Okay, so let's take some questions here. Let's see, one of the ones that we had was building on the 3 to 4 hour infrastructure MTTR discussion. Do we have a breakdown between on-prem and cloud? We will take that as a follow-up question, I think. I don't think we initially split up the data that way, but we'll go through and basically try to do a classification between, if we can observe in that sector, if we can observe if it's on-prem or cloud related, and see if there is a significant difference in the MTTR between those. So we'll take a look there. Okay. Another question was 3 to 4 hours MTTR for infrastructure is the mean. Yes, we did try to do the P50 or on that. And then question as to why the year-on-year values were changing. Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question there, but I think it's the variation in the company performance kind of over time based on the mix of incidents. Okay. And then a next question, and then I'll hand it to you, Aakash, to take some of the other ones. Question is is there a way to tag the cost of the incidents to business value in some way, lost revenue, for example? And do we have some examples I think there's a way to do it. We didn't calculate that in the report. We could actually take that as a follow-up. The cost in some industries can be very direct and clear. So, for example, in payments, where your revenue is based on each transaction, it's a clear kind of cost per second or per minute of your downtime. And in an industry like SaaS, where your contracts renew on an annual basis, the sort of the connection to revenue is a little bit unclearer unless you're breaching the SLA's criteria as well. Aakash, do you want to take the next one here about the value of looking at incidents for somebody else's applications, which is sort of the questioning the value of, I guess, looking outside your company.
Yeah, looking outside company, let me just put the question here. How does it help looking at incidents related to somebody else's application? I'm not going to go to the rest of the part of the question, but if I understand it correctly, if you have the third party dependency on that application, right, or that service, then for sure you need to monitor it, because you might see, and we talked about this, your dashboards might look green, but then you might still you might still have disruptions in your services, right? That's the reason why. And again, as we talked about it, it's all about balance. If it is one of the major driver of your incidents, the third party dependency, then for sure, yes, you need to monitor it. But if it's not the major driver and you have other factors which are actually other archetypes for your incidents, then for sure you need to invest there. So I hope that was what the question meant. How do we fix the issue of those not getting enough or no client to work with at all? I'm not sure. Maybe do better LinkedIn marketing, put yourself out there, and then you might be able to. Okay, let's move on. Also, how SRE save, how SRE save for org? Is there a suggestion or recommendation? How, I'm not sure if it's about cost optimization. See, it's a very broad topic. It will be a webinar on its own.
Yeah, we'll put that in a blog and maybe take that as next webinar topic to show what's the value of SRE and how to show it to the organization. Yeah. How often companies they can do now.
I would say look at your NAT gateway costs. See if you have any older versions of VKS clusters, Kubernetes clusters running on extended support. Maybe just some suggestions, but it's a very broader topic.
Yeah.
How do you decide on what autonomy to grant to AI SRE agents as models are improving continuously? Oh, that again, this depends upon the maturity that you have in your organization. Okay, so start small, build your harnesses stronger. Okay, and you start with, let's say, human in the loop, maybe giving it a very specific task in the beginning. See, every organization is going to have a different level of maturity that you can have autonomy for your AI agents. There is no one right answer for this. It's a step-by-step process. So you first test something. Okay, I'll give it, let's say, I'll give a little bit of freedom and let's see what it does. And if it is performing good, and then you move ahead. But I would say before you start moving ahead, make sure that you test multiple AI model providers with your agentic solution. Don't just stick to one. So you might say, hey, OpenAI work for me. Let me go on increasing the autonomy that I want to provide it. But then going on, maybe for any given reason, you don't want to stick to that model and you want to change the provider, then you will be in trouble again. Rather focus on that. Have your fallbacks ready with you. FinTech definitely makes it easy to derive the SLA penalties. Yeah, yep. They do. But yeah, I don't think there were any other questions. But yeah, do share your feedbacks and comments on LinkedIn. One thing I know, like, this is a learning for me from this webinar is we might have to keep our slides shorter and maybe give more time to Q&As, because there were a few slides where I wanted to talk more, but in interest of time, I could not spend much time over there. But we will try to manage it in a much more optimized way going forward. But yeah, back to you, John.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll also offer, if people would like to get their specific company's data, please reach out to us as well. We're happy to follow up to share that as well and help folks get the most value out of this very large data set that we have. I think it's a lot of applications. So I'd love to hear from folks what they'd like to do with it from here. So we'd like to thank you, Aakash, for your insights and for joining us today. And I hope we can do this again soon. And thank you to the audience for everyone who's shown up today. Thanks for all the great questions. And we look forward to talking with you further next time. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Yeah. Have a great day.